So I want to ask a question. I'm kind of confused because I can't tell which one's safer, E2 or C3. So maybe this is when you can respond. Why do you think C3 is safer than E2, and why do you maybe the other side think that E2 is safer?
The Transportation Department's numbers for accidents per year are something like 7 something on E2 and 10 on C3. So that's their take on things. The reason I say that the two alternatives are going to be about the same, or C3 would be safer, are several reasons. If E2 is built, there's still the local traffic on the old highway. And I did those computations where people would still run off the road. Might not hit other cars, but there's still all these run off the road accidents. You have to look at the whole corridor in terms of safety, because just building E2, which none of the local people can access, doesn't address the safety issues on the old road. The other thing is the big game. The existing highway is considered to have a fairly low number of big game problems compared to some other spots on Highway 95. But once you get up towards the ridge, I think that's going to change. And, you know, if a highway or the wildlife consultant recommends building underpasses, that's a good indication of a lot of big game there that you don't want to hit. And he isn't just kind of coming out of nowhere. The Department of the Interior raised that question again in their comments last Friday. What are you doing to take into account underpasses or culverts for large and small mammals? I don't think this clearing is going to take the animals completely off the road. They're going to be out in dust and people still hit them. And, you know, I think there's plenty of weather conditions when the highway out there will be in a lot worse shape. And this issue was raised a decade ago, and instead of solving the problem, they put out 3 weather stations, but they didn't put them so that you could compare the 3 alignments. You can pretty much say that there's going to be more ice on the western one than on the eastern one, and more fog on the eastern one than on the western one. But it doesn't answer what's going to happen on the central one. And they only did that for 5 months on a very strange year when there was no snow. And then they quit. And so we've had 8 years, 7 or 8 years since then, when they could have kept the weather stations going, put them in the right spots, and answered that question. And so those are the reasons I think that the eastern one is not as safe as they claim.
Thank you. You else like to ask a question?
Hi, I'm Ethan Kovecchio, I'm a student here at U of I, and I'm from Sandpoint. I've seen more accidents driving on this road than I can probably count on 2 hands. I think it's ridiculous it's taking this long to come to the conclusion of this. For my sake and for the sake of this gentleman here who has to attend to them on the highway, and it's unfortunate. But after hearing both sides, I think that I'm in support of C3, although I think that a decision needs to be made as soon as possible regarding where the highway is going. Because I'm not entirely opposed to E2. And the reason is I just want to see a solution to this issue. And I know whichever roadway is taken, it's going to affect people's lives and it's going to affect their farmland on either side of the road. But I really believe that C3 offers an option that is less detrimental to the interests of the landowners who are involved. And also, it offers a route that is less detrimental, perhaps, to the environment. And as a driver, driving from Sandpoint to Moscow frequently, I'm completely okay with taking the C3 route. And the reason I say that is because the statistical guess, if you will, that more people will die on E2 than they will on C3 is still a guess, is exactly that. And no one can say 100% that more people are going to die on C3 than E2. No, it's a guess. It's a very educated guess, a very technical guess, but it's still just that, a guess. And this gentleman here, he asked me, he said, who is going to be a volunteer to go down C3? Who's going to want to do that? And I'll say, I will gladly take C3, because to me, there are more benefits to building that road than to building an entirely new section that cuts out I don't know how many property owners. And many of them may be in support of that route, but I still believe, as a driver, I would rather take C3. Not to mention the fact that having already hit big game with my car and having the front side taken out, I'm just not comfortable with that chance of hitting something on the road at dusk when I often travel back over that route. And so my question is, how can you prove, without a doubt, that E2 will be safer than C3? And why should I drive on that route instead of C3?
I'd like to respond to that, but I also need to make sure I clear the air. I wasn't suggesting that you volunteer to drive on C3. I was suggesting, and it's a bit morbid, I'm suggesting that if you're willing to take the risk of C3, you be the next person to die instead of the one who's going to die, based on the statistics. So that was the offer I was making, and I haven't had anybody take me up on that. But what I would direct your attention to, and time is of the essence here, and that is the technical report done on safety. The appendix to that technical report is every single accident that has occurred on that stretch of road for as long as the IDT has records. And I think from that you'll begin to see they didn't just guess. They played the statistician's game, that's for sure. They forecasted a result based upon existing data. Sometimes there's going to be perturbations in that distribution. You're going to fall out in the tail. But what they were obviously looking for was mean scores, the center point of the distribution. It's not so much a guess as it is a statistical estimate with a margin for error on each table. And so I do want to give credibility. They did a pretty nice job laying it out so that a student or a person interested would be able to digest the data and understand what they're trying to do. It is really quite compelling, and I urge you to go online to the IDT and pull up the safety technical report. It's 131 pages.
I'd like to add too is that the C3 route doesn't necessarily get rid of all the access points. It also doesn't provide a secondary highway to run alongside for the access points for the people that live along that route. And I may be mistaken, but I really doubt that I am. It takes out more houses. It impacts people that live on it more than any other route. Either W4 or C3. I'm very one-sided here, I'll admit, because either W4 or C3 takes out my house and a really nice brewery I built there.
Well, I appreciate your opinion. Thank you.
Anybody else like to ask a question? Yeah, we'll go a little more and then we'll wrap this up.
Real quickly, Mr. Hopkins, and I don't mean to pick on you, you're doing a fine job. You talked about the bottleneck, that traffic coming toward Moscow hits. I travel to Spokane 2 to 3 days a week. I commute for a job, and I consider the bottlenecks between here and north of Plummer much more serious. I mean, there are stretches of road that, long stretches that are 50 miles an hour. Is that not a bottleneck for business traffic?
Well, I have two comments on that. First of all, my sympathies that you have to travel that many times back and forth to Spokane. Those of us who make the airport run share in your pain on that. I think when you look at where 95 is north of Moscow, the development that's been done along that road, say in the last 10 or 15 years, go back to when the Coeur d'Alene Resort was remodeled, and that's really when the highway structure, that's when we started getting some dollars from Boise to do some roadway work here, was when we created that big resort on the north end of Coeur d'Alene Lake. And there's no question that that highway is much safer today than it was back then. But Idaho Department of Transportation is the first to admit their work on 95 will not be over with as a result of finishing this Moscow project. What it will do is eliminate one of their problem areas. And again, they're looking at it, of the 13 highest crash areas in the entire state of Idaho, 3 of them are in that 6.5 mile stretch. So I think getting that fixed is going to improve the traffic flow ever so slightly, but it will give us and our county commissioners some options as we start looking at the highway plan for Lake Tahoe County 5, 10, 15, 20, 25 years down the road. But I think what we'll see is 95 will be systematically improved from bad spot to bad spot, just as they've done. That's to me the checkered approach that they've taken in the last 30 years of Dewey Road. But I do think it is fair to say the 95 commute to Spokane from here today is safer than it was 10 years ago. Especially that area around the casino when they put in that bypass. Yeah, that's a very nice enhancement. Wouldn't it be nice if we could have something like that here?
A couple of points. Why is the existing right-of-way good enough for the rest of the project, except to this point? And then, any response to the black hole was made? It seems like ITD is in effect saying, do it our way or you can't do anything else. Well, I think there's blood on their hands. Why isn't it 30 miles an hour out there, Dan? Has anyone explained that to you?
No.
Well, my explanation is because Clearwater Paper runs the ITD. And until somebody can disprove that to me, and again, this idea about lobbying now for ever bigger trucks. They wish there was a railroad, there isn't a railroad. They're trying to make it the closest possible thing they can to a railroad. It seems self-evident to me in lack of any other explanation. Does anyone have an explanation as to why there isn't a 30-mile-an-hour zone out there if death is the real thing? And I'm just saying death isn't the real thing. That's not what's running ITD.